Welcome to the presentation of a lecture from Gnostic Radio, a free public service from the Gnostic tradition of Samael Aun Weor. Gnosis is the root wisdom of all the world's great religions. Gnosis is a universal teaching of practical science, whose goal is absolute liberation from suffering and the complete development of the human being. This lecture is one of many available by free download or podcast. The hundreds of hours of lectures range in topic and complexity in order to address the many needs of humanity. Each Saturday, Gnostic Radio broadcasts live. The live lecture is accompanied by an online chat, allowing listeners to read additional explanations related to the lecture and providing an opportunity to ask questions of the speaker. To learn how to participate or tune into our continuous web broadcast, visit our website for more information at gnosticradio.org. Gnostic Radio is made possible by the financial support of listeners like you. For more information or to make a donation, visit our website at gnosticradio.org. Now, with heartfelt wishes for the end of suffering for all creatures, we begin the lecture. May all beings be happy.
The letter Vav is the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In the previous lectures, we discussed the letters Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, and He, which are the letters 1 through 5 and the numbers 1 through 5. The Vav, or vowel, is the number 6. All of the letters have multiple levels of meaning and significance. But this is very apparent in the letter Vav. And the importance of this letter is underscored by its usage in the Bible. If you have in your possession a copy of the book of Genesis in Hebrew, which in Hebrew, of course, is called Bereshit, you will be astonished if you examine this book of Genesis and look to see what is the first letter of nearly every sentence. It's the letter Vav. Especially when you study the first 5 books of Genesis, the first 5 chapters. There are only a handful of sentences that start with other letters. But all of the rest of the sentences in Genesis 1 through 5, chapters 1 through 5, they all start with Vav. This is very important, and it's invisible in any other translation of the Bible. You don't see it. It's very important because the letter Vav is a connector. It makes a connection. It makes a bond. It is a channel. It is the means through which forces go from one place to another. And this is why when you learn the Hebrew language, the Vav, aside from being a letter and the number 6, is also used for the word and. So when you write a sentence or you speak a sentence, you would use Vav or Ve for the word and. And of course, the word and is a connector. It is a bridge. We say, you and me. And what connects us is the and in Hebrew, that is a Vav. This is very, very important to grasp about the Vav, because it is in the holy name of God. You see, the 4-letter name of God, the Tetragrammaton, is Yod He Vav He. That Vav is very important there. It is and. And when you look at it that way, you can discover new meanings in this name of God. We've explained this 4-letter name in many ways because it has many applications. But when you see the Vav as and, then this name, Yod He Vav He, reads Jah and He. In other words, masculine divinity and feminine divinity. You see the two polarities in this name. The Vav, on its own, is really a Yod extended. You can see at the top of the letter Vav, a Yod, that small dot, which is the 10th letter. And if you extend that Yod downwards, you create a Vav. The Yod we'll talk about in another lecture. But in synthesis, the Yod represents many things. It is the man, it is a seed, it is a spark. It is the covenant. It is many things. But when that light that emerges from the unknowable begins to descend into manifestation, we see then that Yod extends itself. And this is symbolized by the Vav. The Vav, in other words, represents the bridge, the and, the connection between above and below. It is how God creates. And this is why the book of Genesis, nearly every sentence begins with Vav. In the English, you only see this a couple of times. And God said, let there be light. And God said, etc., etc. The reality is, nearly every sentence begins with Vav, the and. And that creation is synthesized in the first 5 letters. The first 5 lectures of this course have been an attempt to explain to you something that is very elusive to the intellect. And it deals with how subtle energies gradually condense and become matter. This is something that the mind, the intellect, struggles to grasp because we make it a concept instead of trying to imagine the realities of it. But in synthesis, we see how the Aleph, the first letter, which is the breath, which is unformed and subtle, through the Bet and the Gimel, unite as three forces through the Dalet, which relates to Da'at. And in that union, in Da'at, is produced the He, the fifth letter, which is the Divine Mother, who is impregnated, who is fecundated, who is, with her womb, ready to give birth. So the first 5 letters bring us to that moment in the letter He, where the Divine Mother, the Shekinah, will give birth. This is synthesized in the holy name of God, Yod He Vav He, in the first 2 letters, Yod and He. The Aleph, the first letter, is really 3 Yods. If you look at the shape of it, you see it's 3 Yods, but the middle Yod is extended. It is a Vav. That first letter, Aleph, when it combines with its feminine aspect, which is Bet, the mother, who is unfecundated, their union produces Gimel, the third letter. And when they unite through the doorway of Da'at, which is sexual knowledge, all of that archetypal energy enters into the world of creation. So we move from Atziluth to Bria in the 4 worlds of Kabbalah. These are also represented in these first 2 letters of the holy name of God. The Yod relates to Atziluth, which is that very, very subtle level of matter and energy where we just have archetypes and nothing is created yet. And when the Divine Mother and the Divine Father unite in Da'at, we enter into the world of Bria, creation, which is where those masculine and feminine principles now give rise to fecundation, creation. This is why the second letter of the name of God is He. He, the fecundated womb, the feminine principle, the mother. So you see there's beautiful symbolism, but your intellect will struggle. But if you grasp it intuitively, it's not that hard. When that light, the light of Chokmah, the light of Christ, which is within the womb of the mother, wants to descend in order to elaborate creation, this is how we arrive at the world of formation, which is called Yetzirah. And this is related with the third letter of the holy name of God, the Vav. To explain it a little more clearly or visually, you can write these names of the letters of the name of God vertically on a tree of life. If you put the Yod in the upper triangle and you put the first He in Da'at, and then you put the Vav in Tiferet, you start to see how these 3 worlds, Atziluth, Bria, and Yetzirah, relate to these triangles on the tree of life and also to the Sephiroth. What we're looking at here is how these forces are descending and ultimately will create the final He, which is in Yasod. So this is a synthetic tool to help your visualization of these forces. And as we've said before, these are not the only correspondences for these letters. This is not the only way to look at the four worlds. It is not the only way to apply the triangles on the Tree of Life to the four worlds. The Tree of Life is very flexible and is very intuitive. What happens in this process of the descent of energy is that when the forces of the light of Chokmah, the Christ, descend from the upper He, the first He, through the Vav, which is through the world of Yetzirah, formation. This is where those subtle principles of masculine, feminine become materialized, still not physical, but through the forces of all the Elohim, the angels, the archangels, the thrones, the potentates, all of those beings who receive that light and through their own sexual union deliver that light further. You see, every level of the Tree of Life is a reflection of the level above. And just as the Abyum, the Abba Ima, unite to deliver that light downwards, so do the angels and archangels. They receive that light. They function through Da'at in the level of Yetzirah. And they in turn deliver that light downwards in order to illuminate all the beings in their domains. This is how the fourth He becomes Asya, the world of matter, the world of action, the world of energy in action. Asya is the fourth world of the four worlds, and it relates to the physical world, or a physical body. Now what's really beautiful is when you look at how these four letters are stacked vertically atop each other, you see that what has just occurred is the creation of Adam, the man, but the celestial man, Adam Kadmon. This is the archetypal man, the perfect man, made into the image of God. And this is because in his very structure, he reflects all the worlds above him and contains within himself all of the archetypes. This man in the image of God is a Vav, because you see, he is vertical. He is standing. He is upright. This is a Vav in synthesis. Very beautiful. Unfortunately, we are not that. We want to become that. Adam, as is written in the Bible, was created male, female, and placed in the Garden of Eden, which is an existence of beatitude, of happiness, of union with God. Adam, in Eden, perfectly reflected his Creator. But unfortunately, due to temptation, after the division of the sexes, humanity fell. These archetypes were lost. And the reason is, when humanity fell into temptation, the Vav was removed. You see, the Vav represents that upright man. And when that upright man falls from Eden, the letters are taken from him. The knowledge is taken from him. The empowerment is taken from him. One way to look at this is that Adam, which begins with Aleph, You see that Aleph is 3 yods, but the middle one is a Vav. It is a yod that has extended into nature and become a Vav. And when Adam falls, that Vav is removed because he's no longer perfect. That Vav becomes a yod again, which means that Aleph collapses. That Vav is no longer there to provide the structure for the Aleph. Thus, the temple falls into ruin. You see, that Aleph represents the principle and forces of God, the archetypes in Adam. When that is removed, Adam is cast out. Adam is cast into exile. This is our state. We as a humanity no longer perceive God. We no longer are the Vav, the and, the bridge or connection which unites the lower worlds with the upper worlds. We don't have that in our consciousness anymore. Nonetheless, we can recover it. And the entire science to do it is hidden in the Vav itself. And again, this is why the letter Vav is at the beginning of every sentence, nearly every sentence in Genesis. Because the Vav contains everything. It is said in the Zohar that when the Holy One planned to create man, the upper and the lower worlds trembled. They quaked in fear. And the Zohar says this is because all of the upper and lower worlds depend on the actions of man for good or for evil. Therefore, the creation of man concerned them greatly, and they were afraid that he might sin. So the creation of Adam affects all the worlds. And the creation of Adam is particularly concerned with the 6th day of Genesis. Remember, the Vav is the number 6. And on the 6th day is when God, through this process of all the forces descending, has put everything into place, then puts the man, who is male, female, in charge of the garden. And this is the only day where it says, and God saw that it was very good. Not only that, it says, and it was the 6th day. The previous 5 days, it says a day. It was a first day, a second day, a third day, a fourth day, a fifth day. But the 6th day, it says the 6th day. And to say the in Hebrew, you write the letter He. This is a very subtle, beautiful, Kabbalistic mystery. Because what's written there then is He Vav. Feminine, masculine. The 6th day is the only one written that way. And it's because of this, upon the 6th day, is when all the energy and matter is manifested and perfected in male-female. The union of male-female. But this is before the fall. When the fall happens, everything changes. You see, Adam first was created male-female, as an androgynous male, containing those principles within. And in this context, Adam is represented by the letter Dalet. Dalet, which is the 4th letter, looks like a He without the little separate leg on its left side. And Dalet by itself symbolizes a poor man, while Gimel, the third letter, represents the rich man, the innermost, Chesed. And as we learned in the previous lecture about the letter He, the separation of sexes is related in the symbolism of the letters Dalet and He. The letter Dalet represents the atom who has those two polarities within. And when that polarity is split and the sexes are divided, we then see Dalet and He. Right? The fourth and fifth letters of the Hebrew alphabet. But once the division is complete, that man who is singular masculine, no longer androgynous, is now a Vav. In other words, the Dalet is now after the He. The fourth letter Dalet is the androgynous atom, who contains male-female in itself. And when the female is separated, we then see the He, the female. But that means the male is now the Vav. The Vav is Adam as single masculine force, and He is the woman. This is why the sixth day is very good. Even though it's not written in Genesis explicitly that that was the separation of sexes, when the Bible says the sixth day, it's describing that. It's foreshadowing that. It's saying this will happen. The He and the Vav, separate. Male, female. Two beings, two polarities who stand side by side. This is hidden in the holy name of God. Yod, He, Vav, He. That Vav and that He represent the man and the woman. And because the man and the woman are separated sexes, masculine, feminine, the Vav also represents a phallus in a state of erection. The male sexual organ standing upright, energized, and ready to serve. The He represents the receptive feminine sexual organ, ready to serve. So there's a very deep significance here, very profound. As long as the Vav and the He are contained in this holy name of God, then there's something beautiful, something divine, something mystical in that sexual vibration. But unfortunately, as we've learned through the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve fell into temptation. Now, in this context, let us recall that Adam and Eve are symbolic. We're not talking about historical things most of the time. What we really need to look at is how these things relate to us now and how we can change. When we talk about Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, then relate it to now, we know that the man and woman, Adam and Eve, relate to energetic principles within us. Forces, energies. Adam relates to our brain and our spine. And this is the other meaning of the Vav. See, I told you the Vav is a masculine principle. It also relates with our brain and our spine. And if you superimpose this letter Vav over your body, you will see that the top of the Vav relates to your brain. And the length of the Vav is your spine. This in you is Adam. Whether you're a male or a female, the Vav in this context is your inner Adam, your brain, your nervous system. And it is through this Vav that you receive and transmit energy. This Vav is your connection to life, Life is Chaya, Eve. Without the Vav in your body, you could not be alive. Your Vav, your spine, your brain, is how your nervous systems receive and transmit and manage so much energy. The very energy that's keeping you alive in this instant is because of your inner atom, your brain and your nervous system, which is transforming a vast amount of energy inside of you. But that nervous system is the connection to your own inner Heve, your inner Eve, which is your sexual organs. And your sexual organs are the most sensitive part of your nervous system. The most sensitive and the most powerful. Because it's through your inner Eve that you have the power to create Chaya, life. But that creation is not just physical. It is also spiritual. And now you can see why every religion has always emphasized the importance of sexual purity. Not just physically, first physically, but also in the mind. Because the relationship between your sexual organs and your mind is the relationship between Adam and Eve. When your sexual organs become hypnotized, become tempted by the sensations of desire, those sexual organs take that fruit to Adam and corrupt the brain, corrupt the nervous system. This is what's symbolized in Genesis. We do this every day. Our sexual organs tempt us with sensation, with desire, with self-will. And when we fall to that temptation, those energies are transformed and results are transmitted through the nervous system to the brain. This is why our mental institutions are filled with lunatics who are addicted to sexual sensations. This is why people who abuse sexuality develop severe emotional and psychological problems. Because Eve takes the fruit to Adam, and both fall. Both fail. This is all mystically taught in Kabbalah. What it says in the Kabbalistic tradition is that there are 15 forms of sexual misconduct. If you've studied the ancient Tarot, you know that the number 15 relates to passion, the devil, temptation, Lucifer. But 15, Kabbalistically, is 1 plus 5, which is 6. Vav. That means sexual misconduct is related with Vav. Always. These 15 forms of sexual misconduct are symbolic. And they are synthesized in the commandments. The commandments primarily that thou shalt not commit fornication or adultery. We've explained these at length. The synthesis is we need to respect the divine sexual forces which we receive from God. The sexual energy is the very power of the divine, whatever we call it. In Sanskrit terms, that energy is called bodhicitta. In Tibetan, it is called tigle. It has many names, but it is a force, an energy that is not just physical, it is psychological, it is spiritual. Because from that energy is created a human being. And a human being is not just physical. A human being is spiritual, emotional, psychological. And all of that results from that sexual energy, which contains all of it. All of the potentialities, all of the archetypes from above are hidden in the seed, the sexual seed. When we abuse that force, when we misuse it, when we corrupt it through desire, that force is corrupted. Everything in nature is managed by laws. The very existence of our physical bodies in this physical world is possible only because of laws that exist, that are immutable, that are infallible. There are laws that manage energy, such as the law of polarities. Energies are polarized, always, like light. Light is of great scale of vibrations. So is sexual energy. Sexual energy is polarized by our use of it. In the perfect Adam, or in the Buddha, that energy is saved and transformed. It is not infected with desire. Instead, that energy vibrates with a deep, profound psychological purity. There is no lust. There is only the light of Chokmah, the light of Shekinah, the Divine Mother. A beautiful, pure light which illuminates the mind. And in that perfected Adam, or Buddha, that light transcends everything. It descends down the tree of the person, through the Vav, to the sex, and then back upwards, illuminating the consciousness, illuminating everything. And in that process of transformation, the light is increased. This is what it means to be fruitful and multiply. It is to take that seed and grow it, expand it through action. And action is the world of Asya, in the physical world. This is why the greatest Buddhas, the greatest angels, greatest masters work through physical bodies. Because it's in a physical body that the greatest power of transformation exists. And that's because this physical body takes all of the forces of the whole tree of life and puts them in a position where they can be transformed and sent back upwards, greater than they were when they first descended. Unfortunately, we have created a problem because we have succumbed to temptation. We allow desire to cohabit in our mind. We allow desire to be there. In fact, we encourage and feed our desires. So all these forces and energies that descend from above into our own Vav are corrupted. But in Kabbalah, there is hidden a law, symbolically, which prevents our desire from making a mess even worse than the one we have now. And that is symbolized in Genesis. When Adam and Eve eat the fruit of the tree of life, and the Elohim say, "Behold, they have become as one of us, knowing good and evil." And then they are cast out of Eden. Why? Why is that? Because it's through a man's actions that all the rest of the worlds depend. Everything depends on the actions of us. Whether or not the upper and lower worlds will develop in their evolution in the right way depends on our actions in the physical world. You see, that Vav, which is us, stands between good and evil. This is why the Bible says, Tob ve Ra. Tob is goodness, Ra is impurity, and the Ve, the Vav, the and, is in between them. That Vav is you and me. It is our inner Adam, the brain, the nervous system. It's up to us to choose between the path of goodness, Tob, which leads to Chesed, our being, our inner Buddha, or to choose the path of Ra, impurity, pollution. A casual observation of our planet reveals But the vast majority of people have chosen the path of impurity. Because the vast majority of people prefer to indulge themselves in their desires as much as they can until they die. And that's really all life is for them. The result is, through their actions, through our actions, we have created klipot. Klipot is a Hebrew term that means the world of the shells. It is synonymous with any other religion or mysticism that explains the existence of inferior dimensions or lower worlds, also called hell. Hell is a real thing, a real place. But it is real because it is psychological. Hell exists because it is necessary. Because through our mind, through our own inner vav, we have created impurities. God did not create them. The Buddha, the masters, the angels, did not create lust or anger or hate or violence or rape or theft. We did it in our actions here in Asya, the physical world. And because we created those psychological elements, there is then an aspect of nature that contains them. And that aspect is our own subconsciousness. But it is called klipot, hell, the infernos. That is where those energies, which should be positive, have polarized negatively. And it creates the shadow of the tree, the reflection of the tree, or the inferior aspect of the tree of life. When we do that, when we indulge in a desire, when we feed a desire, we transform our psychological, spiritual, and physical energies and polarize them negatively. We take those forces that we receive freely and we infect them with desire. What occurs in that moment is that something is formed in our mind. In Sanskrit, it's called karma. Karma just means cause and effect. It's just a law. It's not fate or destiny. Simply cause and effect. When you perform an action, there is a result. When you feed your anger, you create harm. When you feel angry, you suffer. And that anger causes others to suffer, people around you, and especially the people that the anger is directed towards. This is all karmic, meaning it's cause and effect. That anger is an expression of energies that have been polarized through pride, through fear, through envy. All selfish. And the result is pain and suffering. All of that energy cannot be managed and processed in the superior levels because it doesn't belong there. It's processed through hell, through our own subconsciousness, our infraconsciousness, our unconsciousness. Very deep levels. Most of the time, we're not even aware of it. We're so asleep, consciously, spiritually, we don't even realize that our day-to-day existence is a procession of these kinds of desires, one after another. We feel a little afraid, we get a little stressed out, we start getting anxious, then we suddenly become happy because we got something that we wanted. Then we get worried that we're going to lose what we wanted, so we get afraid. Then we're hungry, we want to eat, we get frustrated because we can't eat. We can't eat what we want. We want to eat something, we can't eat that because we're on a diet or it's going to make us fat. So we get frustrated, we get angry. We see somebody else eating something and we're envious of them because we want to eat that, but we can't eat that. Maybe we can't afford it. Maybe we shouldn't eat it. This procession of desires that goes on and on and on. That is not life. That is not Eden, nirvana. That is samsara. Suffering. Suffering. But we're so used to it, we don't realize that it is suffering. All of those different elements in our mind, those desires, which are in intellect as thoughts, which are in our heart as feelings, which are in our body as impulses. In Gnosis, we call them I's, as in ego. I, myself, me. Because we say, I am angry. I am ashamed. I want. I don't want. All the while not realizing that those I's are not the real me. In fact, they all contradict one another. They fight with one another. We're filled with conflicting desires. And most of them are rooted in sex. Most of the I's have a sexual connection, even if we don't see it. Sexual conflicts, sexual desires, sexual origins. When Adam and Eve are cast out of the Garden of Eden, it is to prevent them from taking the energies of God and creating more egos, more desires. It is to put a harness on those forces. It is to take the connection away. It is to protect the universe. To isolate Adam and Eve, the brain and the sex, from those divine forces, so that Adam and Eve, that person, cannot become a great devil. It is done from compassion. This is why all of us are in spiritual darkness. You can say it's a form of punishment, but it is self-inflicted. We did it to ourselves, and we do it to ourselves every day. As we persist in our desires, as we continue to inhabit the psychological house that we have made out of fear and pride and resentment and envy, we have exiled ourselves from God. And out of compassion, the divinities have taken the Vav away. The upright Vav. To protect us. Otherwise, we would take and eat of that fruit and become as the Elohim, but fully evil. And we would do it. With the mind that we have now, if we had access to the powers of God, we would be terrible devils, much worse than we are now. It's similar to this urge that humanity has to go and inhabit other planets. How absurd is that? We think we're these great angels who are going to walk to other planets and bring the glory of our light. We will not. We will bring the same disease we have here elsewhere. We will bring our filthiness, our failing economies, our corrupt politics to other planets. How arrogant. How blind. We don't even see what criminals we are. But God does. The Buddhas do. And to help us, they took the Vav out. So that one day, if we realize our mistake, we can correct it. In the Zohar, it says very clearly that through sexual misconduct, the Vav is removed from the holy name of God. This is to prevent the river that emerges from Eden the upper Eden, from reaching the lower Eden. This is very deep. The Bible's full of references to this. The Bible states that through your transgressions, your mother is taken from you. Your mother is that upper water, the upper He, the goddess He, who is Shamayim, which means the fiery waters of heaven. Those fiery waters are the Shekinah, the light of Chokmah, the Divine Mother, the goddess. The goddess and the waters are always related to each other. In India, the great goddess Sarasvati is also the name of the great river. The Ganges is a goddess. The oceans are Stella Maris, the Virgin. Through sexual misconduct, the Vav is removed, which is the connector that allows that river from the upper Eden to flow to the lower Eden. Psychologically, this means that those divine forces of the Divine Mother, which in an initiate or a perfect Adam flow from Ta'at to Yasod, are taken away from the one who falls, from the one who sins. In other words, the Bodhisattva, the initiate, who sins, who commits a sexual misconduct, loses his Vav. He loses his power, which is sexual, which is spiritual. And as such, those energies, those waters, no longer connect the two He's, the two aspects of the goddess. In the Bible, they're symbolized as a mother and daughter. In the Bible, it says that let's see if I can find it. And the river shall be wasted and dried up. That river is the river of Shekinah. It's a river of light, energy, which moves down our spinal column into sex to give us that power. When we sin sexually, sexual misconduct is the key. That Vav is taken away. Those waters can no longer flow downwards. The lower He dries up. That lower He relates with us. It is our own inner Divine Mother. It is the Shekinah in us. And this is why it says in the Bible that when Israel sinned, the Shekinah abandoned the temple. That feminine aspect of God leaves the temple, the ark, the Aron. And Israel is left with nothing. And this is our state. Spiritually, we have nothing. Spiritually, we are dried up. We have no life in us spiritually. We are dead. We are a desert. The little bit of energy that we receive, we still use it for crime. That little bit of force that descends into us through our atom, which gives us just barely enough to scratch out a living on the face of this planet, we still use it for crime. We cannot even use that and honor the divine. To use that energy and respect it. Instead, we use it and we disgrace it. And we do this every day. You see, it states very clearly in every tradition that when you utilize your energies and channel them into impurity, the path of Ra, we dishonor God. We dishonor the Buddha. The impurity of our mind takes those forces which are divine and corrupts them and fills klipot. In the Zohar it says that this energy, the Vav, is removed so that that water, that force, cannot be given to the mixed multitudes. In the Jewish or Hebraic tradition, the mixed multitudes are 5 groups. They're talked about as ancient beings or creatures, like the Nephilim, which means the fallen ones. But these 5 groups, while they have a historical relationship with ancient races, really they are a symbol, psychologically, of the ego. The Zohar states that that water, that force, is stopped in its flow because otherwise it would feed the mixed multitudes. The mixed multitudes would take it and use it and make suffering worse. And this is true. If those forces and energies continued to flow from the divine into our mind as it is now, in other words, if Adam and Eve, as fornicators, were to still take the fruit from the tree, they would become terrible devils. Their own mixed multitudes within, all those desires, those egos, would have the power of God. And what would you have then? You think suffering is bad now? Such a thing could not be allowed. This is why it is stopped by laws in nature. Stated another way, when you look at this Vav, and you remember it represents the spine, the top of it is a Yod. But really, the Vav is 33 Yods. Your spinal column has 33 vertebrae. When you add that 3 and 3 is 6, your Vav. In other words, when we sin, our inner Vav is not allowed to receive the forces from above. In other words, our spine loses its fire. That energy is arrested, blocked, stopped. And what little energy we have is polarized negatively. And that force, that energy, feeds the mixed multitudes, the ego. That fire, the light of Chokmah, which in an upright atom fills the Vav, in Sanskrit is called Kundalini. And when the Vav is filled in that way, in Sanskrit, the Vav would really be called Shushumna. It is that central, subtle channel in the very center of the spinal column, through which the light of Chokmah, the Shekinah, the Divine Mother, can rise and illuminate us. This is the river that brings life, Chaya. In the upright initiate, the Buddha, the Master, that is only possible when Adam and Eve are in harmony. This has a whole range of meanings. Energetically, physiologically, it means that on either side of this spine are the forces of Adam and Cheve, the forces of Adam and Eve. In the Bible, these are called the 2 witnesses, which stand before the God of the earth. The earth is our physical body. The God of the earth is Chesed, our being, who can descend into us through this fire in our nervous system, the Kundalini. Chesed only can do this through Shekinah, that river, the light, the Divine Mother. And those two witnesses stand on either side of the spine. Those two witnesses are, in Sanskrit, Ida and Pingala. Symbolically, they are Vav and the next letter, Zayin. Symbolically, they are Adam Keve. This is all physiologically within us. But to accomplish that, to arrive at that, we have to work physically, sexually, spiritually, as Adam and Eve. The Zohar says that the Shekinah, the Divine Mother, can only emerge when male and female are united. Did you know that? This is the basis of Kabbalah. The very basis of Kabbalah is sexual union. It says explicitly in the Zohar, when does the Shekinah reside within a man? And he said, when he marries. And this sign enters to its place to the Shekinah. Then they are attached together, the male and the female, who are the sign of the covenant and the Shekinah, and are called by one name, and supernal Hesed rests upon them. Sex is the clue, the key. We've told you that the name of God, one name of God in Hebrew is El. And we've described the meaning of the word Elohim. And Elohim has many meanings, but it is a plural word. The singular form of Elohim is El, God, masculine. The feminine form is Eloah. Eloah is a name of the Shekinah. Eloah means goddess. Yes, Hebrew Judeo-Christian tradition includes goddesses, even though the Christians don't like to admit it. The Bible's full of references to Eloah, the goddess, but the translators put God instead of goddess. In fact, the book of Job is filled with discussions and descriptions of Eloah, the goddess. But you have to look in Hebrew to find it. Nonetheless, if we want our own inner being, Hesed, to descend on us, to illuminate us, the clue is given in the Zohar. This happens through the Shekinah, the Divine Mother. And this happens through the union, the marriage of male-female. And let me show you something very beautiful where this is hidden. The name Eloah in Hebrew is Aleph, Lamed, Vav, He. The first two letters, Aleph, Lamed, spells El, God. This is Hesed, our being, our innermost. The Zohar says that the name Eloah is also interpreted as follows. El, the first two letters, is the light of Chokmah. The Vav is the male. The He is the female. Male and female are attached together and are called by one name, Eloah, goddess. So the holy soul, Shekinah, clings to this place, and everything depends on the sign of the covenant. That was a quote from the Zohar. This quote states precisely what Tantra explains. Tantra, whether Buddhist or Hindu, explains very clearly the goal of the tantric initiate is to awaken the force of Kundalini. The Kundalini is the force of the Divine Mother. That's why it's called Divine Mother Kundalini. Devi Kundalini, Kali Ma, Durga. All of these names refer to Agni, the fire, the force of all creation. And that creation is always through the Divine Mother. The Tantric seeks to awaken that Kundalini and raise it up through Shushumna, which in Hebrew is the Vav. The Zohar explains exactly the same thing. This can only be accomplished through the marriage of male and female. When they are united, male and female, sexually, the Vav and the He, from this name of Eloah, when they unite, the force of El, the light of Chokmah, descends upon them. In other words, God is there. How else do you think that we have the power to create? Through sex. Because God is there. The power to create life is the power that God has. Even if we don't call God God. If we respect that power, if we obey the guidance that we receive from the Buddhas, from the masters, which all state, restrain the sexual impulse. Do not spill the tigle, the bodhicitta, the jasmine flower drops. Restrain it. Pray. And when you do that, that light of Chokmah is the presence of Shekinah, the Divine Mother, and that light grows. This is how the light of that Yod, which is the sign of the covenant, descends through the upper He in Da'at, the secret knowledge, through the Vav, the spinal column, into the lower He, Yesod. This is how our own individual Shekinah, our own individual Kundalini can be awakened. It's beautiful. Not easy. It takes a great deal of willpower. A great deal of knowledge. If we fail in that moment, and we become tempted by desire, all of that force and energy is polarized according to our desire. This is when the man, the Vav, stands at the tree of knowledge. But remember, the tree of knowledge in the Bible is Da'at, Tob Ve Ra. The knowledge of good and evil, purity and impurity, and the Vav is in the middle. You are the Vav. You choose. In every moment, but especially in the sexual union. This is the main opportunity to choose your path. The Zohar states that if we fail, if we commit sexual misconduct, whether in the sexual act or during our day-to-day life, we unveil the nakedness of the Shekinah. We use our energy to blaspheme. We use the sexual force, whether emotionally or in the mind, to look at the nakedness of our Divine Mother. We convert that energy of chastity into lust. And the Shekinah becomes Lilith. She becomes Kali Ma, the mother of death, the mother of hell. And those forces of the Shekinah, instead of creating in the positive way, in the upright way, create in the negative way. That Lilith is Medusa. The Kundalini is symbolized as a serpent. In the Bible, this serpent is Nahash. When the Israelites were in the desert committing sins, they were being bitten by serpents and dying. Fiery serpents. This is because they were sinning. They were doing it to themselves. They were fornicating. And their own serpent, the Kundalini, was inverted, polarized negatively, and was biting them, creating pain, creating death. Moshe, on behalf of the people, prayed and said, "What do I do?" And God said, "Raise a serpent upon a pole, and any man who looketh upon it shall be healed." What is it to raise a serpent upon a pole? It is to raise the Kundalini upon the Vav. To raise the Divine Mother Shekinah on the Vav. And that power can heal. This is what we need to do every day. To raise the serpent on the rod. The Kundalini. This is why the sacred symbol of the Divine Mother is an upraised serpent. This is why we see photos of Athena, the Divine Mother, with serpents, but particularly with a serpent who serves her. And she always has a staff, a spear, which is the Vav, the rod. This is why Moses carries a staff, why Aaron carries a staff, a rod, and when he strikes it, it becomes a serpent, and it consumes the serpent of the Egyptians. This is why Heracles wrestles the serpents as his first task. None of this is coincidental. It all emerges from that one truth, which is Da'at, Gnosis. By wrestling the serpent, which is the power of Samael, through strength like Heracles, we raise the serpent on the staff through willpower in sex, but also willpower over mind, conquering our mind, dominating our desires with conscious will. That conscious will to do the work is the Vav. Because you see, when you count 6 Sephiroth downwards from the top of the tree of life, the 6th sphere is Tifereth. Tifereth is the Vav. Tifereth is the human soul. This is our consciousness, but specifically related with willpower. Conscious will. Tifereth. Is always symbolized as a warrior, the knight who does battle with the dragon, Perseus, who conquers Medusa. Athena, the Divine Mother, whose symbol is the serpent, provides to her hero the mirror, shield, the helmet, the spear. And through his intelligence, which is the power of the Divine Mother, Binah, he conquers Medusa, whose head is a field of serpents. Those serpents are the fiery serpents that bit the Egyptians, or the initiates, the Israelites in the desert. The hero takes that staff, the rod, the Vav, which is the power of the Divine Mother. He raises that serpent on the pole. And he can conquer the mixed multitudes, which are represented in the Medusa. This is how this initiate, little by little, step by step, perfects himself. There are many representations of this in the Bible. In particular, we call your attention to the three kings. Do you know who the three kings are? Saul, David, and Solomon. We all think the three kings, we think about the Gospels and the three wise men, the Magi, who came to see the birth of Christ. These are the same three kings, symbolically speaking. Because the story of Saul and David and Solomon is a story of an initiate who in the beginning is nothing. It is Samuel, a prophet, but very, very low. Symbolically in the Bible, we see how that prophet announces the arrival of Saul, Shaul, who becomes the king, but a low king, impure. And then that king, from him emerges a new king, which is David, who's better than Saul, more pure, but has bigger problems. Right? And then from David emerges another king who's better, more pure, but has even bigger problems. Solomon. These are the stages of initiation, symbolically represented in the Bible. All of it is with the Vav. The name David is Dalet, Vav, Dalet. If you write that name over this tree that we have on our board here, you put that Dalet where the upper Hey is. The Vav is where the Vav is. And the other Dalet is at the bottom. You see, Yod He Vav He. Yod Dalet Vav Dalet. David fits there. But you see, David is only in Malkut. David is in the beginning. David is a king, a Malachim, but needs to become more than that. And in his name is the clue of what he needs. David is a Dalet, but he needs the Hey. He needs Bathsheba. And you see, when David finds Bathsheba, he finds a big problem. Because Bathsheba is his twin soul, his true love, but she's married to another man. This is called karma. Through paying karma, we face psychological death. And you see in the drama of David how beautifully this is represented. Very painful. But by passing through that pain, that humiliation, David dies. And from his union with Bathsheba comes Solomon, the man of peace, Shalom Man. The man of peace is Solomon, the solar man, who is on his way to invite Christus. You see, these three kings are traveling to greet Yeshua. Beautiful. So the Vav has great significance. Many levels of application and meaning. Do you have any questions?
You said that if we did not have God within us, then we wouldn't have the power to create through the sexual energy. However, if we're fornicating, is that power of God still there? Or has it left us to
Every sexual union is a transformation of divine forces. All energy is divine, ultimately. All energy. The animals, the plants, the minerals, all take energy, which is in its root divine, and they take that force and transform it. That energy in itself, we call Christ. It is just fire. Life exists because of that energy. All life. Every atom in your body is active and energetic because it has that force in it. And if that force were removed, it would not be alive. It would be dead. Right? So that means any act is a transformation of Christic forces. Any act. Even the cellular division in your body is a sacrifice of fire, where those cells go through a great transformation of energies, and they are split and divided. It's a division of sexual forces, right? Same in plants, minerals, animals, everything. But in the sexual act in the humanoid level is the greatest collection of forces that we have access to, right? Whether it's done in an animal way or an angelic way. The energy is the same, the result is different.
Question 1. Are the names, meanings of Ra and Seth reversed in Hebrew and Egyptian traditions because of their biblical animosity to each other?
The names in the Bible in relation with Ra and Seth, and especially in relation with the Hebrew tradition, is explained pretty fully in the lectures about Da'at. We gave 3 lectures about Da'at, the tree of knowledge, and talked extensively about Seth. Also in the lecture called the Sons of Samael, we talked about Seth. But in synthesis, the name Ra is not spelled the same way as the divine name Ra. They're different. So we shouldn't confuse them. And Seth as well has multiple applications. Seth can be positive or negative. Depends. Just like us. We can be positive or negative. It depends on how we use our energy. Seth is the same as that. We are that. Another question?
In the engravings and paintings, those with the Holy Spirit are pictured with a curly fire over the head. Is this like Vav plus Vav or Lamed 12 in the way that Vav is related with the Kundalini? I'm not sure if that makes sense. I'm having trouble putting it into words.
So the question is about the Pentecostal flame that emerges on the foreheads of the apostles in the book of Acts. And it says that the Spirit of God descended upon them. Right? That fire is the fire of Christ. It is the light of Chokmah, which is Shekinah, the Divine Mother. And that light can be represented in many ways. Most significantly by the letter Shin, which in its shape looks like a fire or a flame. If you look on your chart, you'll see the letter Shin. It looks like a flame with 3 points. Nonetheless, that fire is what illuminates all the letters. The Yod is like a spark of fire, right? And the Shin is just 3 Yods. So you can see that everywhere, all the letters. The Shin can also be 3 Vavs, because those Vavs of the upper triangle, the Aleph, when those 3 Vavs descend and unite, that is Shin. That is the process from Absolute to Bria and below. Yes?
You said that subtle energy can turn into matter. What type of matter? And can a subtle buildup of subtle energies into matter over time provide a very powerful experience for a short period of time?
Yeah, I was talking about the transformation of energy into matter and matter into energy. This is the basic postulate that Einstein revealed through his theorem. And this is not an unusual thing. It is a basic fact of existence that you really cannot destroy anything completely. You can only change it from one state to another. Right? You also cannot create anything. You can only change some things into another state. The importance of that is that the sexual energy is subject to those laws. When we have sexual matter in us physically, it is a condensation of subtle energies. That matter is energy, and that energy is matter, and you cannot separate them. You can only transform them by will. When you accumulate that sexual matter, you are creating a storehouse of forces. If you do not transform them, those forces will become destructive. They will polarize. And this we can witness all over the world in traditions where religious people are taught to save their energy but not taught how to transform it. And so those people become fanatics, they become abusers of children, they become homosexuals, they become masturbators, because that energy needs to work. It has to. And if they ignore it, the energy will go wherever it can. And when that person has a mind full of lust, that energy will power that lust. It will drive it. So they become with a lot of problems. Yet if you learn how to transform that energy, it becomes a higher form. The physical matter is transformed into spiritual matter, which we call Kundalini. There's a lecture also called The Fires of Kundalini, where we explain that. Yes?
Why are the sexual organs so sensitive, and how does positive sexual stimulus affect the nervous system?
The sexual organs are so sensitive because they are the prime transformer of energy in the physical body. They need that degree of sensitivity in order to manage the intensity of the sexual force. It sounds contradictory, but it is necessary. The reason is the sexual energy is extremely fine. It is extremely particularized. It is rarefied. And if you don't have the subtlety of sense to perceive it, you will not see it. In other words, if your sexual organ has become desensitized, then you cannot perceive when there is still energy there that needs to be used in the right way. So if you're a tantric and you're practicing tantra, and you want to transform the totality of your sexual forces and to make them spiritual and divine, if your sexual organs are not sensitive, you cannot see those energies. You won't know they're there. In other words, those energies will become harmful. They will hurt you because they're not transformed. You need the sensitivity of the organs in order to completely transform all of the energy. It makes it very difficult, but it's necessary. When you do it, when you're able to positively harness those energies and forces, it has a dramatic impact on the body and the nervous system and the mind. And this is because the sexual forces are the hormones. The very force of Haya, life, the force of being. Our physical bodies grew and developed because of hormones. From being a baby to being an adult, the whole process of that beautiful flowering is a result of sexual forces. So when we become an adult, we can continue that, the unfolding of that beauty, if we harness those energies and use them well. Then our mind, our body, our heart become more beautiful. This is why the angels are so beautiful. This is why the masters and the Buddhas are so beautiful and radiant, because they irradiate purified sexual fire. Pure. And yes, that's true. The name Tiferet in Hebrew means beauty. Right? And that is the Vav. The human soul, when it transforms the totality of that sexual force, becomes an angel. Becomes the greatest creation. This is why it was stated in the beginning that when God said he was going to create man, the angels were worried. Because they knew if the man became what the man should be, he would be more beautiful than the angels. And some of them became jealous. Right? You heard that before? It's part of the fall. In fact, those fallen angels sometimes are called Nephilim, which are one of those 5 races of the mixed multitude that I talked about. Was there another question back there?
Yes. Can playing a video game be fornication at some level? Abstaining from playing a video game and then meditating, that is better use of the sexual energy, clearly. But is playing a video game fornication?
That's an interesting question. The question is playing a video game fornication? And if you abstain from that game and meditate instead, this is clearly better, right? So the question was asked. Any activity can be fornication. Anything. When that energy that's passing through our 3 brains is infected with desire. You see, in the Gnostic tradition, we use this word sexual abuse. Most people use sexual abuse to describe when someone physically, sexually abuses another person, like rape or incest or something like that. But we use the term more broadly and more specifically at the same time. Sexual abuse is any abuse of sexual energy psychologically first. Physically, maybe, but maybe not. All of us abuse sexual energy psychologically. We might not do it physically, but we all do it psychologically. Stated another way, any action we perform is a transformation of forces, whether we see it or not. The forces of the mind are empowered by the forces of sex. This is the relationship in us between Adam and Eve. When you use your mind in the wrong way, you're taking forces from within you and directing those forces. This is, in the Bible, it's called blasphemy. It is to use those forces in the wrong way and commit a crime. Not only against ourselves, but against that energy, against God or Christ in us. So yes, you can fornicate by watching television, by watching movies, by reading books, by fantasizing, by daydreaming, even if it isn't sexual imagery. When you're using those forces to create desire, that is fornication, psychologically. Do you see that? To fornicate is to use the sexual fire to create in the wrong way. You might fornicate physically, which is a wrong thing to do because it creates suffering. You can fornicate emotionally when you use your emotional forces to create envy, anger, jealousy, lust. These are all forms of creation, but they are fornication because God does not create anger, envy, lust, fear. We do. That is fornication, psychologically. Another question?
Yes. Does transmuting sexual energy completely remove them from you in a gross state completely for a while? Is there physically no semen left in you?
The transformation of the sexual energies is not limited to physical matter. A tantric who's working in the practice of White Tantra, restraining the sexual force and transmuting that energy, will not necessarily see the physical matter vanish. But they will take the energy out of that matter. That's all. Another question?
These are the chastity of the being for love, beauty of the being.
Yeah. Yeah, the chastity is the duty of God in us to transform that matter into energy. And again, that only happens through the lower hay of the divine name, which is in Yesod. That is our own inner Shekinah. And the presence and existence of that Shekinah in us, the Kundalini, is to receive those forces from the upper hay, transform those forces, and redirect them back up, which illuminates the tree of life. This is how that energy descends into the physical body and condenses itself as sexual matter. The sperm and the ovum. That matter is there, full of all the archetypes, the potentialities of God. We waste it, physically, psychologically. But when we harness it, we extract those spiritual essences and send them back upwards. We transform those forces. There may not be a visible sign physically. This is why we also state, when someone awakens the Kundalini, you cannot tell physically. You can't look at a person and say, oh, that person's awakened their Kundalini. No way. Because that energy is not physical. In the same way, the forces of the Shekinah are not physical. When you transform your sexual matter, you are extracting energy from the physical level and bringing it back to the subtle level, transformed. The physical vessel remains where it is. You can't confuse the laws of physical matter with the laws of spiritual matter. They're different. In the same way, this might get a little hard to understand, but when you leave your body remains where it is. Right? You can't tell physically if someone has left their body. The body is just there. This is why masters, great masters, can leave their body even while their physical body is active. Because the spirit, the soul, can leave. When we talk about sperm and ovum, the same rule applies. The extraction is to extract the soul and the spirit of the Mercury. The vital forces. Not the physical side, not the physical aspect. It's to extract the soul and spirit from it. That's alchemy. Another question? All right, we'll see you for Zayin next week.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Help Gnostic Radio to help others. Make a donation by visiting gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the wide variety of resources available on our websites. Thank you for your support. May all beings be happy.